Long time ago, in the beautiful kingdom of Umon, King Obiora had a daughter named Princess Ifeoma. Ifeoma was not only the most beautiful maiden in the land but also wise, kind, and loved by everyone. Many young men wished to marry her, but King Obiora had one condition for anyone who dared to ask for her hand. To marry my daughter, you must swim across the pool of 100 crocodiles. The pool was deep, wide, and filled with enormous crocodiles with sharp teeth. No one had ever attempted the challenge because the crocodiles looked too dangerous and the pool was too terrifying. But one day, a young farmer named Ikin decided to try. Ikin lived in a small village at the edge of the kingdom. He was poor, but he was strong, hardworking, and clever. He had always dreamed of marrying Princess Ifeoma, not because of her beauty, but because he admired her kindness. When Ikin told his mother about his plan, she gasped. "Ikin, are you mad? No one survives the crocodile pool." "I know, Mama," Ikin said, "but I must try. I have nothing to lose but everything to gain." Ikin packed his bag with food and water and walked for 2 days to reach the king's palace. When he arrived, he joined a large crowd of men who had come to admire the princess. But unlike Ikin, most of them had no intention of swimming across the pool. King Obiora stood on his royal balcony and addressed the crowd. His deep voice carried across the courtyard. "If you wish to marry my daughter, you must swim across the crocodile pool. But beware. The crocodiles are hungry, and only the bravest man will succeed." The men in the crowd whispered to one another, some laughing nervously. Ikin stepped forward and shouted, "I will do it." The crowd gasped. Princess Ifeoma, standing beside her father, leaned forward, curious about the bold young man. "Very well," said King Obiora, raising his hand. "Prepare yourself, brave one." Ikin was led to the edge of the pool. The water shimmered under the sun, but the crocodiles were clearly visible, their eyes peering above the surface. The crowd gathered around, eager to watch. Some mocked Ikin. "He's just a farmer. He'll be eaten in seconds." But Princess Ifeoma called out, "Good luck, brave one. May your courage guide you." Ikin took a deep breath. He removed his sandals, tightened his belt, and stepped closer to the edge. Suddenly, a royal guard approached and handed him a small piece of advice. "Remember, not all challenges are about strength. Use your wits." Ikin nodded, his heart pounding. As Ikin stared at the crocodiles, an idea came to him. From his bag, he pulled out a pouch of dried meat he had brought for the journey. He threw a piece into the water. Splash! The crocodiles scrambled toward the meat, snapping and fighting each other for the treat. Ikin smiled. He threw another piece farther away, drawing the crocodiles to the other side of the pool. The crowd murmured in surprise. "What is he doing?" When the crocodiles were distracted, Ikin dived into the pool. Ikin swam as fast as he could, his arms slicing through the water. The crocodiles, still busy with the meat, didn't notice him at first. But halfway across the pool, one of the larger crocodiles turned and began swimming toward him. The crowd screamed, "Swim faster!" Ikin reached into his pouch and threw the last piece of meat toward the crocodile. The giant beast paused, snapped at the meat, and left Ikin alone. With a final burst of energy, Ikin reached the other side of the pool and climbed out, dripping wet but unharmed. The crowd erupted into cheers, and King Obiora stood, his face a mix of surprise and admiration. "Young man, you have done what no one else dared to try. You are truly brave." But then the king smiled slyly. "However, bravery is not enough to marry my daughter. To win her hand, you must pass one more test." The crowd gasped, and Ikin looked up, determined. "What is the next test, Your Majesty?" Princess Ifeoma stepped forward, her eyes sparkling with interest. "Father," she said softly, Perhaps we should allow him to rest before the next challenge. The king nodded. Very well. Tomorrow, your final test will begin. After the crowd dispersed, Ekin was escorted to a small room in the palace to rest. The room was modest, with a soft mat and a clay lamp flickering in the corner. But Ekin couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the mat, wondering what the next challenge could be. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Princess Ifeoma entered, holding a small tray with a bowl of steaming soup and a wrapped bundle. I thought you might be hungry, she said with a gentle smile. Ekin quickly stood and bowed. Thank you, Princess. You are kind to think of me. As he ate, Princess Ifeoma watched him curiously. No one has ever dared to face the crocodiles, she said. Why did you? Ekin swallowed a spoonful of soup and replied, because I believe courage is not about strength but about doing what is right, no matter the cost. And I believe you are worth fighting for. The princess blushed, but before she could reply, a palace guard knocked on the door. The king wishes to see you now, he announced. Ekin followed the guard to the royal chamber, where King Obiora sat on his grand throne. The king's face was stern, but his eyes held a glimmer of respect. Ekin, the king began, you have shown bravery and wit by crossing the pool of crocodiles. But to marry my daughter, you must also prove your loyalty and wisdom. He clapped his hands, and two servants entered the room carrying a large golden chest. When they opened it, the chest was filled with sparkling jewels, gold coins, and treasures that shone like the sun. This is your next test, the king said. Tonight, I will leave you alone with this chest. If you can resist the temptation to take even a single coin, you will prove that your heart is pure. But if you fail, the king's voice trailed off, leaving the warning clear. Ekin nodded solemnly. I accept the challenge. That night, Ekin was left alone in the king's private chamber, with the golden chest sitting in the center. The treasures glimmered in the soft light, and the room was silent except for the distant chirping of crickets. At first, Ekin sat with his back to the chest, determined not to look at it. But as the hours passed, the sparkle of the gold caught his eye. Just one coin, a small voice whispered in his head. No one will notice. Ekin shook his head and stood up. To distract himself, he began pacing the room. He thought about his mother, who had always taught him to be honest. He thought about Princess Ifeoma, whose kindness had inspired him. Suddenly, he heard a noise, a faint rustling sound near the window. Ekin froze. Turning toward the sound, Ekin saw a shadowy figure climb through the window. It was a man dressed in dark clothes, with a sack slung over his shoulder. The man's eyes widened when he saw Ekin. What are you doing here? Ekin demanded. The man smirked. I should ask you the same thing. But since you're here, why don't we share this treasure and live quietly? No one will know. Ekin's heart raced. He realized this was another part of the king's test. I will not take what does not belong to me, Ekin said firmly. The man laughed. Suit yourself. More for me. He reached into the chest and began stuffing gold coins into his sack. Just then, the door burst open, and King Obiora entered with his guards. The man froze, dropping the sack as the guards seized him. The king turned to Ekin. You have passed my test, he said. I planted this thief to see how you would react. You have proven that you are not only brave but also honest and loyal. Ekin bowed. Thank you, Your Majesty. I only did what I believe is right. The king nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. You have done well, young man. But there is one final test before you can marry my daughter. The crowd gathered outside the next morning, eagerly awaiting the final challenge. Ekin stood tall, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Princess Ifeoma, watching from the balcony, whispered to herself, I believe in you, Ekin. The next morning, the palace courtyard was packed with people. News of Ikin's bravery and honesty had spread, and everyone was eager to see the young farmer face his final test. The king stood on his balcony with Princess Ifeoma by his side, both watching as Ikin stepped forward with calm determination. King Obiora raised his hand to silence the crowd. "Ikin, you have proven your courage, wit, and honesty. But a future king must also possess a heart that is compassionate and selfless. For your final test, you must choose, save your life's greatest treasure or save the life of another." The crowd murmured in confusion. Ikin frowned. "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" The king clapped his hands, and 2 guards entered, leading a trembling old woman. Ikin's heart dropped. It was his mother. "Your mother will be placed in one room," the king continued. "In another room will be a golden crown and staff, symbols of wealth and power. Both rooms will be set ablaze at the same time, and you can only save one." The crowd gasped. "You have 2 choices, Ikin," the king said. "Save your mother and lose your chance to marry my daughter, or save the crown and prove you are willing to sacrifice personal ties for the good of the kingdom." Tears welled in Ikin's eyes as he glanced at his mother. She looked at him with a sad but loving smile. "My son," she said softly, "do what your heart tells you. I will always be proud of you." As the drums beat and the fires were prepared, Ikin's mind raced. He thought about his dreams of marrying Princess Ifeoma, of proving himself worthy. But how could he leave his mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him? The signal was given. Both rooms were set ablaze, and smoke rose into the sky. Without hesitation, Ikin ran toward the room where his mother was held. The heat was intense, and the flames roared like wild beasts. Ikin kicked open the door, coughing as the smoke stung his eyes. "Mama! Mama! I'm here," her voice called out weakly. Ikin pushed through the flames, shielding his face with his arm. He found his mother huddled in a corner and lifted her into his arms. "Hold on, Mama," he said. "I won't let anything happen to you." With all his strength, he carried her out of the burning room. The crowd erupted into cheers and tears as Ikin emerged, his clothes singed but his spirit unbroken. King Obiora stood from his throne, his face unreadable. "Ikin, you have made your choice. You saved your mother, but the crown and staff are lost. Tell me, do you regret your decision?" Ikin shook his head. "No, Your Majesty. Wealth and power can be replaced, but a mother's love is priceless. I could never abandon her, not even for a kingdom." The crowd roared with approval, and even the sternest of the king's advisors nodded in admiration. King Obiora smiled, a rare and genuine smile. "Ikin, you have passed the greatest test of all. You have shown that you are not only brave, wise, and honest, but also selfless and compassionate. These are the qualities of a true leader and a worthy husband for my daughter." The king stepped down from his throne and placed a golden crown on Ikin's head. "From this day forward, you shall be known as Prince Ikin of Umon." Princess Ifeoma descended from the balcony, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Ikin," she said, "you have shown me the true meaning of love and sacrifice. I will be proud to call you my husband." The crowd cheered as Ikin and Ifeoma stood together, their hands clasped. The drums thundered, and dancers filled the courtyard as the kingdom celebrated the union of the brave farmer and the kind princess. During the grand feast, Ikin stood to address the people. "My journey has taught me that greatness is not in riches or power but in the strength of one's heart. Always choose kindness, courage, and love, for these are the treasures that no fire can destroy." The crowd erupted into applause, inspired by Ikin's words. Ikin and Ifeoma were married in a grand ceremony, and together, they ruled the kingdom with wisdom and compassion. Under their reign, Umon became a land of peace and prosperity, where bravery, honesty, and love were celebrated by all. And so, the story of Ikin, the farmer who dared to swim across a pool of 100 crocodiles and face impossible tests, became a legend passed down for generations.